Title: The Blueprints of a Father's Heart. 3 weeks before his son's 10th birthday, Ethan Caldwell couldn't sleep. Every night, long after his wife had gone to bed, he'd sit alone at the dining room table, hunched over a stack of scribbled plans, sketches, and receipts. Not for work. No, this wasn't about the construction firm he ran. This was about something far more sacred: his son's dream. Ben wasn't like most boys his age. While other kids begged for video game tournaments or wild trampoline parks, Ben had one request. "Dad, can I design my own birthday party this year? I want it to feel like I'm commanding a real spaceship." His voice had trembled with hope, like he was asking for the moon. And Ethan? He'd have lassoed the damn thing down if it made that kid smile. Ben had already drawn the cake, not just a doodle, but blueprints. The kid was a genius in miniature. He wanted a 3-tiered cosmic sculpture, glowing planets made of fondant orbiting a central rocket ship with edible silver wings and flames of sugar glass. He asked if the stars could sparkle, if Saturn's rings could float. Every night he adjusted his drawing, his face scrunched in focus, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth. Ethan watched in awe. He saw himself in that boy, the same precision, the same need for things to mean something. This wasn't about cake. This was Ben trying to put his heart into something real, something he could share without having to explain why he felt so different from the other kids. At school, Ben didn't fit. Too smart, too quiet. He got picked last for kickball. He ate alone some days. But here, in his party, he could be the captain of his own universe. And Ethan? He'd be the one making sure that universe came to life. He called a dozen bakeries, got laughed off the phone more times than he could count. A rocket ship cake that lights up, with spinning planets. "Sir, we do birthdays, not NASA launches." But Ethan kept calling, because quitting wasn't an option. Not this time, not for Ben. When he finally met a baker named Gloria, who looked at the plans and whispered, This is art," Ethan nearly cried. She got it. She saw the heart behind the frosting, the wonder in the details. That night, as Ben practiced blowing out candles in the bathroom mirror, his brows furrowed like he was defusing a bomb, Ethan stood silently in the hallway, watching. His chest ached with love and terror. He needed this to go right. He needed Ben to feel celebrated, protected, visible. Because sometimes a cake isn't just a cake. It's a boy's whole world, held together by dreams, and a father determined to make them real. Title: The Shadow at the Gate. Everything was almost perfect. Almost. The guest list had been finalized, the rocket-themed invitations sent, and the backyard was slowly being transformed into a galactic wonderland. But there was one name Ethan couldn't stop circling with a red pen: Travis, his wife's younger brother. If Ben's birthday was a symphony in motion, Travis was the off-key trumpet waiting to ruin the finale. 28, unemployed for the 3rd time this year, Travis was the kind of man who walked into a room like it owed him something. Loud, reckless, permanently stuck in frat boy mode. He thought being obnoxious was a personality trait, thought just messing around was a valid excuse for anything. Ethan had seen it too many times, at weddings, holidays, family dinners. Always a stunt, always a scene. And worse, Ben remembered. He remembered the Thanksgiving when Travis accidentally knocked over his Lego Saturn V display, laughing as pieces scattered like debris in zero gravity. He remembered the 4th of July when Travis lit a firecracker too close and left him sobbing, hands over his ears. And he especially remembered Ethan's birthday, only 5 months earlier, when Travis shoved Ethan's face into his own cake, laughing, recording it, and posting it online like it was just another harmless prank. That night, Ben had curled up beside his father in the dark. "What if he does that to me?" he'd whispered, voice tight with fear. Ethan had kissed the top of his head and promised, "He won't, not on my watch." But promises are fragile things when others don't honor boundaries. Ethan had sat Travis down the week before the party. No yelling, no threats, just firm, quiet words. "You will not ruin Ben's birthday. No pranks, no jokes. You keep your distance unless you're invited in. This isn't about you, Travis. It's about a boy who needs to know, for once, that he matters more than your punchlines." Travis had laughed. That smug, careless laugh that made Ethan's knuckles twitch. "Dude, relax. It's just a birthday party. You're acting like the kid's launching an actual rocket." Ethan didn't respond. He just stared long and cold until even Travis's smile faltered. But still, he didn't trust him. He'd seen the look in Travis's eye when people were watching, that hunger for attention, that need to stir the pot. It wasn't mischief, it was menace disguised in humor. And Ethan knew, deep in his gut, that this wasn't over. As he locked up the garage that night, Ethan glanced toward the sky, stars blinking softly overhead. His son believed in space, in science, in structure. But Ethan? He believed in storms, and something told him one was coming. Title: The Moment the Sky Fell. The day of the party dawned like a miracle. Blue skies stretched over the Caldwell home, cloudless and perfect, exactly how Ben had sketched it on his color-coded itinerary, down to the hour. The backyard shimmered with LED stars strung between trees, cardboard control panels lined the fence like mission stations, and Ethan, though exhausted, was calm, proud. Ben had woken up before sunrise, already dressed in his Commander Ben t-shirt, eyes glowing with wonder. "Dad, it's here," he said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "It's really happening." Ethan knelt beside him, fixing a wrinkle in his shirt. "You built this day, buddy. All I did was follow the blueprint." By mid-afternoon, the guests arrived, Ben's small but loyal crew. Quiet kids, kind kids, the ones who brought homemade cards and wore space-themed socks because they knew it would make Ben happy. The scavenger hunt went off without a hitch. The laughter was easy. Ethan let himself breathe. Even Travis had stayed on the fringes of the crowd, sipping a beer by the fence, scrolling through his phone. Ethan had half wondered if the warning had worked. Maybe, just maybe, today would pass without incident. Then Rosa arrived with the cake. It was breathtaking, a three-tiered galaxy masterpiece crowned with a glowing sugar rocket ship. The kids gasped. Ben whispered, "It's perfect," in that small, reverent way only children can. Ethan carried it out himself. 10 candles flickered like tiny stars. The kids sang loudly, joyfully. Ben stood behind the cake, hands clasped, eyes closed in practiced focus. And then, everything shattered. A blur of motion, a whoop of false excitement. Travis. He charged from the sidelines like a linebacker in a college game, beer can flying from his grip. Before Ethan could move, before anyone could scream, Travis reached Ben, grabbed the back of his head, and slammed his face into the cake. There was a sharp hiss, then a scream. Not the kind children make when they're surprised. No giggles, no laughter, just pain. Ben's voice cracked the air like thunder. The frosting masked it at first, blue and silver smeared across his glasses and cheeks. But then Ethan saw it. A red welt, already rising where one candle hadn't gone out. A thin line of burn scorched across his son's delicate skin. For one frozen second, no one moved, and then the world exploded. Ben stumbled back, sobbing, "My cake! Dad, my cake!" Ethan dropped to his knees, wiping at his son's eyes, heartbreaking with every shaky breath. Around him, chaos bloomed. Kids were crying, a mother was scrambling for ice, a planet fell off the ruined rocket and cracked on the ground. But what hurt Ethan most, more than the burn, more than the destruction, was Camille. Standing there, her hands outstretched, telling him to calm down. "It was just a mistake," she shouted. "He didn't mean it." But Ethan wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Travis, who had backed away with frosting on his shirt and guilt smeared across his face. Ethan stood slowly, fire in his chest, voice like steel. "You just declared war on a child, Travis, and you better believe there will be consequences." And for the first time all day, Travis finally looked afraid. Title: The Swing That Echoed. The night after the party, the Caldwell house was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence was thick, unsettling, like the calm that follows a storm but promises another. Ben had cried himself to sleep, clutching the ice pack Ethan gave him, a ghost of the burn still glowing red on his cheek. Ethan sat beside him for hours, watching his son's chest rise and fall, listening to the tiny sighs that slipped out between dreams. But when Ben stirred and whispered, "Why did he do that to me, Dad?" Ethan felt something inside him snap. He kissed his son's forehead, turned off the nightlight, and walked out of the room. He didn't go to bed. He didn't speak to Camille, who sat on the couch, arms crossed, still insisting it had all been a terrible accident. At 4 a.m., Ethan found himself in the garage, standing in front of the wall of tools he'd organized by hand years ago. Drills, wrenches, hammers. But his eyes locked onto something else, an old wooden bat, still hanging on the back peg, untouched since his college days. He took it down, not in rage. In clarity. There was no fire in his blood, only ice. This wasn't about revenge. This was about balance. about making sure Travis never forgot what he stole from that little boy. A cake, a moment? No, he took safety, dignity, innocence. 15 minutes later, Ethan parked across the street from the Warner family home, white siding, a porch swing, and Travis's pride and joy sitting bold in the driveway. A blacked-out Jeep Wrangler with custom tires, a polished grille, and beast mode plates. Ethan stepped out, bat in hand. No ski mask, no hoodie, no attempt to hide. He walked up the driveway under dawn's first light, stood in front of the windshield, and whispered, "This one's for Ben." Crack! The bat slammed into the glass with a force that shook Ethan's bones. A spiderweb of fractures exploded across the windshield. He hit it again and again, until shards of safety glass spilled like diamonds onto the hood. A door flew open. Travis staggered out in boxers and a panicked mess of bed hair. "What the, Ethan? Are you crazy?" Ethan turned slowly, calm as a winter lake. "Now you know what it feels like." Travis blinked. "It was a prank. I didn't mean to. You burned my son. You humiliated him in front of his friends. That cake wasn't just dessert, it was his dream, and you took that from him, on purpose." Ethan dropped the bat at Travis's feet with a hollow thud. "This is your warning. You don't come near Ben again. Not at Christmas, not on birthdays, not when we're in the same zip code. You've lost that right." Margaret, Travis's mother, appeared in a bathrobe, mouth agape. "We'll call the police." Ethan turned to her, voice steady. "Do it. Call them. I'll show them the video. I'll show them Ben's cheek." Across the street, porch lights flicked on. Neighbors appeared, coffee mugs in hand, watching the scene unfold. Not a soul looked surprised. And then, from Mrs. Klein, the 78-year-old across the street, a slow, deliberate clap, followed by another and another. Travis stood frozen, surrounded not just by broken glass, but broken illusions. Ethan turned, walked to his truck, and drove away as the sun broke fully over the horizon. And in that light, for the first time since the cake hit the floor, he could finally breathe. Title: The Court of Public Reckoning. By the time Ethan pulled into his driveway that morning, the weight in his chest had lightened, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. He walked into the house just as Camille was walking out, phone clutched in her hand, keys jingling. Her hair was wild, her voice sharp. "Where were you?" she demanded. "I went to talk to your brother," Ethan replied, quiet and firm. "He got the message." "What did you do?" Ethan looked her dead in the eyes. "I broke his windshield. That's it, and I'd do it again." She stared at him like he was a stranger. But the universe wasn't done speaking. Because while Ethan stood silently in his kitchen, pouring coffee with hands that no longer shook, something extraordinary was unfolding on the internet. Owen's mom, quiet, observant, always with a phone in hand, had filmed the moment it happened. The exact second Travis slammed Ben's face into his dream cake. The scream, the candle, the burn, the horror frozen in frosting. She posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with 5 words that changed everything. "This is what he did." By noon, the post had spread like wildfire, shared 200 times in just hours, then to Instagram, then TikTok, then Reddit. The internet didn't flinch, it roared. "That's not a prank, that's assault. You don't get to call it just a joke when a child is crying. This man hurt a kid for likes. Hope that windshield cost more than his reputation." Someone even did a split-screen video. On one side, Travis's smug post, "Some people can't take a joke. Chill, man." On the other, Ben screaming, the burn, Ethan rushing in, Camille frozen in place. The contrast was damning. But the hammer didn't fall until Monday. Ethan got a message on Facebook from a stranger named Amanda. "Hey, my husband works at the same car dealership where Travis just started part-time. I showed their HR team the video. They let him go this morning. We don't hire people who hurt kids." Later that day, Camille's Aunt Julia called, the only member of her family who'd ever said things straight. "Marcus, I saw the video. Finally someone put that boy in his place. That man's been getting away with crap since middle school. You didn't just stand up for your son. You stood up for every quiet kid who's ever been laughed at for crying." Even Ben's school took notice. The next day, his teacher, Miss Reynolds, pulled Ethan aside. "Mr. Caldwell, I just wanted to say, I've never seen Ben so confident. He raised his hand twice today. He even corrected another student's math mistake. Whatever you did, it worked." But perhaps the most powerful moment came that evening. Ethan walked into the living room and found Ben sitting cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through the TikTok comments. Camille sat next to him, silently reading. Ben looked up, eyes wide. "Dad, people are saying you're a hero." Ethan smiled, kneeling beside him. "I'm not a hero, buddy. I'm your dad. That's the job." Ben reached out and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for making them listen." Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it carries a bat. And sometimes the loudest court of all is the one that holds its trial through a phone screen and delivers its verdict through millions of strangers who say, in one unified voice, "You went too far, and someone finally stopped you." Title: The Boy Who Found His Voice. A week had passed since the day the cake collapsed and the world watched. The burn on Ben's cheek had faded to a soft pink crescent, like a second smile made by fire, but the boy who wore it had changed. At school, Ben no longer walked with his head down. When a classmate cut in front of him in the lunch line on Tuesday, Ben didn't freeze or step aside like he usually did. He looked the boy in the eye and said clearly, "Excuse me, I was here first." It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it was enough. His teacher, Miss Reynolds, called Ethan later that day. "I don't know what's happened, but I've never seen him this present, this bold. He asked a question during science and corrected me when I misspoke about the moons of Jupiter." She laughed, and he was right. At home, Ben wasn't just existing, he was engaged. He asked Ethan if he could help fix the telescope that his grandmother brought for his birthday do-over. He printed out star charts, he made a list of constellations he wanted to find by spring, but most of all, he started using a word Ethan hadn't heard from him in months: us. "Dad, can we make a volcano for the science fair? Can we try building that Lego Mars rover together? Can we go to the planetarium this weekend?" Every time Ethan heard it, something inside him healed. It wasn't just about bonding, it was about belonging. Ben wasn't afraid to take up space anymore, and maybe, just maybe, that started because he saw his father claim space for him when nobody else would. As for Ethan and Camille, things weren't perfect, but they were honest now. Gone was the uneasy silence that had filled the house in the days after the incident. Camille had returned, not just physically, but emotionally. She no longer tried to explain Travis away or ask Ethan to smooth things over. She asked better questions now. "Do you think Ben's really okay? Should we start looking into a gifted STEM camp for summer? Do you think I failed him?" Ethan never answered that last one directly. He knew she was wrestling with guilt, and no words would speed that process up. So instead, he showed her, with patience, with kindness, with partnership, that they could rebuild. That night, as Ethan tucked Ben into bed, he paused beside the glowing constellation decals on the ceiling. Ben looked up, eyes half shut, and said, "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Is it weird that I kind of like my scar?" Ethan blinked. "Not weird at all. Why? Because it reminds me that sometimes standing up hurts a little, but it's worth it." Ethan leaned down, kissed his son's forehead, and whispered, "You're braver than most grown men I know." Ben smiled, "Only because I have you." And in that moment, under those plastic stars, in a quiet bedroom lit by healing and hope, Ethan realized something simple and powerful. His son had found his voice, and he'd never lose it again. Title: Drawing the Line. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Camille had always been the peacekeeper, the bridge between her brother's chaos and the quiet life she built with Ethan. Growing up, she'd been conditioned to smooth things over, to apologize for Travis's messes, to keep the family together, no matter the cost. But something shifted the night she watched Ben cry into her arms, whispering, "Why didn't you stop him, Mom?" That question hit harder than any argument Ethan could have made, and it didn't go away. It followed her into the shower, into the car, into her dreams. It echoed every time she passed Ben's bedroom door and saw the faint pink burn on his cheek. No longer a mark of damage, but of betrayal. Her betrayal. One Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the party, Camille sat in her car outside her parents' house, engine off, hands trembling on the steering wheel. She was supposed to drop off some old photo albums Margaret had asked for, but she didn't get out. Instead, she stared at the neat rows of hedges, the perfectly trimmed lawn, the Jeep still parked smugly in the driveway. Travis's Jeep, the one Ethan had cracked like a warning shot. And yet, Margaret still hadn't asked once about Ben's face, not a single call to check in. No apology, no acknowledgement, as if the real problem had been the windshield. Camille took a deep breath, grabbed the albums, and walked up to the door, not as a daughter, but as a mother with a line to draw. Inside, her parents greeted her like nothing had happened. Her father offered her coffee. Her mother complained about HOA fees. Travis came down the stairs in socks and a smug shrug. "Hey sis, you here to drop off more drama?" Camille looked at him, really looked. The boy she used to protect was gone. In his place stood a man who had hurt a child for attention and never truly said sorry. "No," she said softly. "I'm here to say we're done." The room froze. "What do you mean, done?" Margaret asked, voice sharp with that familiar edge of control. "I mean, Ben won't be coming back here. No family dinners, no holidays, no birthdays. Not as long as Travis is around." Her father scoffed. "Oh, come on, Camille, he made a mistake." "No," Camille replied. "He made a choice, and so am I." She turned to Travis. "You hurt my son. You laughed while doing it. You made excuses. You acted like the victim. And for the first time in my life, I realized that keeping this family together meant breaking the people I love the most." Travis opened his mouth. She raised her hand. Don't say you didn't mean it. I watched the video. You knew exactly what you were doing." Then she turned to her mother. "If you ever want to see your grandson again, it starts with 3 words. I am sorry. And not for the broken glass, for the broken trust." She placed the photo albums gently on the table. "But if you can't say that, if you still think this is about Ethan overreacting, then you can keep the memories. We'll make new ones, without you." And with that, she walked out. When she got home, Ethan and Ben were assembling a telescope in the backyard. The sun was setting, casting orange streaks across the sky like painted promises. Camille stood at the gate and watched them. Father and son, her family, her real family. Ethan looked up, wiping grease from his hands. "Everything okay?" She nodded, eyes glassy. "It is now." Then she walked into their yard, not just crossing a threshold, but leaving an entire past behind. Because sometimes love isn't about keeping peace. It's about protecting the space where peace can finally grow. The voice that echoes. 6 months later, the scar on Ben's cheek had faded to the palest pink, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But Ethan still saw it every time his son smiled. Not as a wound, but as a reminder of the day a boy was broken, and the man who refused to let that be the end of the story. Life moved forward quietly. No more family dinners at Camille's parents' house. No more fake laughter. No more Travis. The air in the Caldwell home felt different now, lighter, like something toxic had been cleared from the lungs of their life. Ben was thriving. He joined the school's robotics club. He entered a citywide science fair with a project so intricate the judges had to double-check the age bracket. He wasn't the quiet kid anymore, still gentle, still thoughtful, but now, when something felt wrong, he spoke. When he saw someone else being teased, he intervened. When his teacher asked who'd like to lead the group project, Ben raised his hand. And Ethan had never been prouder. One evening, as the last of summer's warmth lingered in the yard, the two sat beneath the stars. Ben with a notepad, Ethan with a coffee mug, both staring through the new telescope. "I think I found Mars," Ben whispered, adjusting the lens. "You're closer than you've ever been," Ethan said. A pause. Then Ben spoke again. "Dad, do you think Uncle Travis could ever hurt someone again? Like he did me?" Ethan set down his mug. "I don't know," he answered honestly, "but I do know he won't hurt you again." Ben nodded slowly. "I told Maya last week that if someone ever scares her, she should say something, that she shouldn't be afraid to speak up." Ethan smiled. "That's a good thing to tell someone." I said, "My dad taught me that your voice matters, that even if you're small, you can still say stop, you can still say no." Ethan felt his throat tighten, the kind of ache only love can cause. He looked at his son, not just a child anymore, but a person growing into something solid, brave, unshakable. "You taught me that too," Ethan said. They sat in silence for a long time, not the awkward kind, the sacred kind. The kind only shared by people who've been to the edge and come back stronger, together. Inside, Camille was humming while packing Ben's school lunch. Astro, their golden retriever, was curled up at the back door, tail thumping softly. Their home wasn't perfect, but it was safe. And that was everything. As Ethan stood up to stretch, Ben looked up at him and asked one last question. "Dad, if something ever tries to hurt someone I love, is it okay if I stand up, even if it's hard?" Ethan crouched beside him, looked him in the eye, and said, "Not only is it okay, Ben, it's what good people do, and if anyone forgets that, remind them." Ben nodded. "Even if I need a bat?" Ethan chuckled, ruffled his son's hair, and said with a grin, "Let's hope it never comes to that. But if it does, just make sure it's for the right reasons, not to destroy, but to defend." Ben looked back at the stars, eyes sparkling. And in that moment, Ethan realized his son didn't just feel safe. He felt powerful. Because sometimes the greatest gift a father can give isn't protection. It's permission to speak, to stand, to believe their voice matters, and that, no matter what, they will never have to face the darkness alone.